book in progress brings to mind a swimming pool under construction. Only the constructor himself must decide when the pool is worthy of water, not only of swimmers. To a Jew, the words pool and water might signify mikvah, a gathering of water for the purpose of purification of objects and persons. Is my inner swimming pool kosher for my reader's total immersion?
Jogger's knee and swimmers. We have tennis elbow, jogger's knee, and simmers, and swimmers what?
I'm sorry, all I can think of is trunks.
Tennis elbow, jogger's knee.
The Polish-born author was found dead in his Manhattan apartment after he took his own life.
The 57-year-old Kosinski, a Polish Jew whose life and literature were haunted by images of violence and the Holocaust, ended his life with the most gruesome image of all, his own head wrapped in a plastic bag. His wife found her husband's body in the bathtub of their apartment on West 57th Street. She said he'd been depressed lately over a writer's block and left a suicide note. A literary enigma for 15 years, Kosinski certainly wrote the end of his own story, but a literary inquest is bound to follow as to who he really was and why he ended his life in the murk of mystery.
The only way to make life meaningful spiritually is take it moment by moment. You can be decent and important to yourself only if you actually grasp what is happening in this very moment, since that's all your life is all about. It is always a given moment. It is not the past, and certainly not the future. There might not be any future. And so the only way to make sense out of your life is to define it as indeed if it were a novel.
Jerzy Kosinski did live his life as if it were a novel, and many of its facts are still hard to verify. We do know that he was born in 1933 in Poland, arrived in America in 1957, and became an award-winning author. His suicide in 1991 came as a shock both to his friends and to the woman who had loved him for 27 years.
We were the best of friends. We were mother and father. We were brother and sister. We were lovers. We were the same sex. We were the opposite sex. We were everything. We were totally together. All sports were a total liberation for Jerzy. And skiing was probably his very first love, because it was the time he went to the mountains right after the war. It was such a liberation for him. He remembered the joy of his youth and the fun and the freedom. And he used to say, well, you know, I've become tall and blonde, blue-eyed and short-nosed. It's almost incomprehensible to me that I am here for him. I sat and watched him through many a program. And where are you, Jerzy?
The issue is what it is that you do with your own life. There's really no other question. There's nothing more important.
Your life, the total of your life so far is an amazing fantasy. You had a traumatic childhood. You came to this country at an early age, mastered 24, mastered the language, became a best-selling novelist. You're an actor, you play polo, you put on the phony beard and run around at night.
That's the best thing I do.
Jerzy. But you know, he said about clothes, it gives you a chance to reinvent yourself or reinterpret yourself. Absolutely the best idea. Jerzy, guys, Jerzy, turn around now, just get a little bit. Did he know Jerzy?
Jerzy.
Everything to do with passion play.
Good man, we'll do passion play.
Yeah.
was a role player. He was an actor, and he created so many different and varied roles for himself that you, as a friend, never knew what person you were relating yourself to.
Jerzy stood out in the New York literary world like a sore thumb. He discredited himself. He was on David Letterman. He was a celebrity. He annoyed a lot of people.
I have made great number of friends and great number of enemies. And this is the price that you have to pay. If you would ask me whether I care about it, I do not. I like to have friends and I like to be liked. And I would rather have friends than enemies. But if the price for doing what I'm doing is having very vicious enemies, fine. I have no children to worry about. And so I'm going to do it exactly that way. I'm going to be individual when I want to be and collective when I have to be.
He used his life as a basis for his art, and his life also became an artifact.
I think many times, I thought at the time many times that being there was his story, that he actually was John C. Gardner. That was his story of a society that projected something in him that he didn't necessarily have.
There's something Krylovian about you.
Do you think so?
I believe that you know Krylov. Get plui for collogius, pregaditza within a pizza.
So, you know your Krylov in Russian, do you?
I had always the feeling that Jerzy was running, and to some extent running away from something. I was struck by the fact that there was something very elusive about the way he identified his past, that he was even vague on his own personal origins. He kind of let it be understood that he was Polish, Gypsy, Jewish. It wasn't clear what were precise limits of these different components of his past.
I was born as a Jew, of Jewish parents. Enlightened, East European, Jewish. From the age of 6, when the war began, when I was separated from them, I was brought up as a Catholic.
The New York Times Magazine, February 1982. Whether or not you admire Kosinski's generally harsh but widely read novels, you have to honor the man for the dangers he has passed, for his rage to live. He was 6 years old, the gently bred only child of well-off Jewish parents when the Nazis occupied Poland in 1939. Jerzy Kosinski, lovingly named Rourke, was sent away into the remote countryside by his desperate parents to save his life. They themselves did not expect to survive the war. The friend to whom his parents entrusted him abandoned him, as hundreds of other children were abandoned in that time of terror, and he became a wanderer, forced to beg for food and shelter among the most backward, brutish peasant communities of the inaccessible Polish countryside.
He was a gifted, appealing con man.
He didn't feel the normal constraints in dealing with, quote, the truth. He felt the truth was relative. He felt that fiction, in his case, and life should merge.
His appalling adventures during those years are described with battering and brilliant force in his first novel, The Painted Bird, published in 1965, the year he became an American citizen. It has since become a classic of Holocaust fiction.
I lived in Marta's hut, expecting my parents to come for me any day, any hour. Crying did not help, and Marta paid no attention to my snivelling. She was old and always bent over, as though she wanted to break herself in half but could not. Her long hair, never combed, had knotted itself into innumerable thick braids impossible to unravel, those she called elf locks. Evil forces nested in the elf locks, twisting them and slowly inducing senility.
He had never escaped that childhood. A 6-year-old Jew in Poland in 1939, it's simply unimaginable to me. Utterly unimaginable.
The enigma of Kosinski's childhood lasted for more than 30 years and seemed destined to remain a mystery forever. But new research reveals that Kosinski, born Levenkov in Łódź, fled the Nazi occupation with his parents and arrived in the medieval town of Sandomierz in January of 1940.
Znam, były to lata 40, wczesne lata 40. Ja miałam wtedy 9 lat. Jurka poznałam, miał około 7 lat. Pamiętam makijaż pani Lewinkowowej. Używała jaskrawo-czerwonej szminki, pudrowała swoją twarz. Jurek nie był lubiany przez rówieśników. Był za poważny, małomówny, nie brał udziału w zabawach, raczej był obserwatorem i widzem.
We could go upstairs right now.
Is there a TV upstairs? I like to watch.
You like to, watch?
Yes.
You wait right here. I'll go get Warren.
As the Nazi persecution of Jews continued, the Levenkop family changed their name to Kosinski and moved into the Polish countryside. The details of their flight are still unclear, but it seems that by early 1942 they arrived in a remote village in the south of Poland, which was to become a model for the mythical landscape of the painted bird.
Przed tym domem stał kiedyś duży budynek 6-rodzinny o długości 30 metrów. To był dom własność mojego ojca i matki. I w 5. mieszkaniu po prostu mieszkali Kosińscy. Wiele rodzin nie chciało ich przyjąć, ale moi rodzice po pewnych oporach zgodzili się. Bo jakoś po prostu niehumanitarne to było nie przygarnąć człowieka. Bo to byli Żydzi, i w tym czasie nie mieli schronienia, nie mieli wyjścia, nieprzyjęcie ich równało się ich śmierć.
My duty was to set snares for Lech, who sold birds in several neighbouring villages. There was no one who could compete with him in this. He worked alone. He took me on because I was very small, thin and light. After prolonged scrutiny, he would choose the strongest bird, tie it to his wrist and prepare stinking paints of different colours. When the colour satisfied him, Lech would turn the bird over and paint its wings, head and breast in rainbow hues until it became more dappled and vivid than a bouquet of wildflowers. When a sufficient number of birds gathered above our heads, Lech would give me a sign to release the prisoner. It would soar, happy and free, a spot of rainbow against the backdrop of clouds, and then plunge into the waiting brown flock. We saw soon afterwards how one bird after another would peel off in fierce attack. Shortly, the many-hued shape lost its place in the sky and dropped to the ground. When we finally found the painted bird, it was usually dead.
Jak zobaczyłem tytuł Kosińskiego książki Malowany ptak, no to mi się od razu przypomniały lata młode właśnie wtedy, kiedyśmy z tym Jurkiem tam byli, bo to było za okupacji, skąd powstał tytuł Malowany ptak. Ten Lech złapał kiedyś wronę, tą wronę pomalował wapnem na biało. Jak on tą wronę puścił pomalowaną na biało, tamte wrony zaczęły ją bić. No i biorąc do ręki malowanego ptaka, od razu sobie uzmysłowiłem, że przecież to jest to.
Tak jak głupia mnie, to się nie ma to opiadalać. Jak koniec, to koniec, bo jak nie, to jak jeszcze grabne wypiadana i koniec. U mnie tego nie ma. To jak tam to mogą darmo wypierdolić.
Jerzy invited my wife and me to dinner at his apartment on West 57th Street, where he and Kiki lived. And after dinner, Jerzy told us that wherever he lived, he had a hiding place, and that he could hide in this apartment, and we would not be able to find him. And he said that if we gave him 30 seconds to hide, we would not be able to find him. So we stepped out in the hallway, we walked as far as the elevator and back again, re-entered the apartment. We looked under the bed, looked in the closets, we examined the furniture, the doors, the windows. We could not find Jerzy. And then we said, we give up, Jerzy, where are you? And Kiki knocked on a bookshelf. The door to the bookshelf popped open, and Jerzy unfolded himself from behind a row of books. Somehow he had scrunched himself up like that. He was totally hidden. And it was bizarre behavior, I suppose. But it also, I suppose, was the reflex action of a Holocaust survivor.
Panie Jerzyku.
This was our bedroom, the presidential suite. There have been several American presidents stayed here. This is obviously the bedroom. Our bathroom, bigger than most rooms for most people, with real gold flecks on the wall. If we run out of money, we can always start picking out the gold, I think. In this house, it was a wonderful, wonderful home to us in the winter.
Jurek Kosinski's dreadful journey reached its climax when, aged 9, he was flung for punishment by sadistic peasants into a pond of human hors d'oeuvre that closed over his head. Something in his mind clicked off, and he was struck mute.
In an instant of time as brief as the prick of a needle, the weight of the missile grew overwhelming and tipped me backwards. The ceiling of the church reeled. Rough hands tore me up from the floor and pulled me towards the doorway. The crowd parted. From the balcony a male voice shouted, "Gypsy vampire," and several voices took up the chant. Hands clamped my body with excruciating hardness, tearing at my flesh. Outside I wanted to cry and beg for mercy, but no sound came from my throat. The fresh air hit my heated body. The peasants dragged me straight towards a large manure pit. I retched. The peasants swung me by the hands and feet. The pale clouds in the blue sky swam before my eyes. I was hurled into the very center of the brown filth, which parted under my body to engulf me.
Służył w kościele do mszy. Jednego razu mszał mu wypadł, no ale ktoś mu nogę podstawił.
A nie wrzuciliście go do gnoju, naprawdę?
To tego nie było, pani, to on sobie to znowił. Ja takiej sceny nie pamiętam i żebym nie słyszałam tego.
No a coś za nie mówił?
Mówił od początku, jak go zapamiętałem, mówił do końca.
Well, he wrote novels which are fiction by definition. He did not write documentaries or biographies or autobiographies, you know. So he can write what he wants. I mean, the whole fiction is a business of lies, is it not?
Kosinski and Roman Polanski were contemporaries and friends in the 50s in Łódź. Polanski was sent away during the war, hiding in a village without his parents. Some people say that The Painted Bird was really his story.
We never talk about war. I never remember, in our youth, talking about war and the war experience.
Why not?
Just did not come up, and I wasn't in general bringing it up in my daily conversation. It was something that I left behind, something I was willing to forget.
To the extent that myth, that this was indeed his experience, was propagated by him, it probably endowed him with additional mystique in the New York intellectual community. It made him be the epitome of something very special. And in that sense was probably useful. It enhanced his social, intellectual, creative standing.
Mr. Gardner, what was your reaction to the Post's editorial on the president's speech?
This is sort of the kind of thing that they really like, you know. This is sort of this big fantasy world of a night at the Metropolitan, grand like Jersey himself.
We miss him, don't we?
We always will miss him, but he always will be with us.
Always, always, always.
You can't photograph me closer than here because I know lousy light. It was very charming. You stand at a dinner party and you don't know who you've got next to you. And I'm very shy. And he was wonderful. He was funny, he was zingy, he was smart, he knew everything. He was just terrific.
Ameryce się Żyd powiesił, a u nas będą naszemu bykowi i krowie film kręcić. Co to ma z tym, jaką łączność z tym ma, co to ma być?
One of my great memories of Jersey is floating straight upright like this in the swimming pool, like a cork.
That's true.
Which he made us a big bet,
yes,
whether he could do it or not.
And then you all lost.
They pinned me down with a long pole used for fishing in ice holes. When I ceased struggling, they dragged me towards a nearby hole. I resisted desperately at the edge of the water, but they were ready. Two of them widened the hole, and then they all heaved together, pushing me under the ice with the pointed end of the pole. They tried to make sure that I could not emerge. The icy water shot over me.
Ja sobie nie wyobrażam, jak można było do tego stopnia opisać w tej książce bycie tu między nami.
You were going to just say one sentence about JERZY Kosinski. What would it be? A war casualty.
Maybe he wasn't the little wandering child. So what? He felt in his heart like a little wandering child. And this is all you need to know. He was hidden by another family during the Holocaust. This is all you need to know. In his heart, he experienced all those things. What difference does it make if he literally experienced them or not?
No i ten malowany ptak, ta książka, no to jest taka obrażająca po prostu mieszkańców wsi, no bo w każdym razie ten malowany ptak to była taka aluzja do niego, że on, będąc tutaj w czasie okupacji, był tak samo po prostu dyskryminowany przez mieszkańców, jak ta pomalowana wrona, co było nieprawdą.
He didn't live in the world of truth. Anybody who had to survive under German occupation would have to accept that certain lies are just necessary for the survival. Anybody who lived in the Polish reality of Stalinism would very early understand that it's all great hypocrisy and lie.
One of the things I never did in our friendship was to say, well, what really happened?
Why not?
Because I didn't think it was important. And neither did he. His fiction was so important to him. His books were his children. He didn't want children.
Kosinski did have a stepchild, David, the only son of his first wife, Mary Weir, a millionairess 18 years his senior, whom he married in 1962, 5 years after his arrival in America.
I guess he was in his late 20s at the time. I was about 16, 17, thereabouts. And so he was 10 or 11 years older than I was. So he was kind of like an older brother, but a rather exotic older brother. He took me to a brothel one night when my mother was out of town. They were married then. He seemed very interested in those things, and I guess I was about 17 or 18, and I was naturally interested in those things too, but not quite in the same way he was.
So what happened?
We took a girl away from the brothel. It was a call girl place on 42nd Street, and took her back to a friend's apartment. And there was a group of people, 3 men, I think. And so the evening progressed.
Were you shock bait at the time?
Well, you have to understand, I was a rather prurient teenager, you know. And so on the one hand, yeah, it might have seemed a bit odd that I was going whoring with my stepfather while my mother was out of town. But on the other hand, I was avid for experience, which kind of goes along with that age. So I didn't think about it too much until years later.
It seems that Kosinski's fairy tale marriage to the millionairess failed almost as soon as it started. In numerous interviews, he maintained that she died eventually of a brain tumor. In fact, she had been an alcoholic all her life and killed herself in 1968. 4 years earlier, Jerzy had met Kiki von Fraunhofer. They were to be together until his death.
I fell in love with a girl. Let's give her here the name Bożena. Across the stream, over and over again, I would eye her. One day, I finally crossed the stream. Pretending I was wrestling with her, I made her fall on the ground, where somehow she found herself under me, and then I couldn't stop. Kissing her, biting her lips, sucking on her until I marked her until she bled. I wanted Bożena wet, wetted from within. We kept on kissing, her blood and my blood all mixed up.
I was invited to the Polish ball by a friend of mine. Meanwhile, I was engaged to be married and going off to Switzerland to get married in 3 weeks. We went to lunch, we started talking, and I realized immediately that I couldn't go through with my marriage. I'd found a part of myself even in that lunch, and that was very much the way our whole relationship was. Jerzy gave me myself. He wanted to make sure that what I accepted to do would be completely my responsibility.
There's just no question that Kiki was everything to him, was companion, was center of his life. He couldn't have functioned without her. He relied on her for everything, absolutely everything, except for one thing. And that thing, he would sort of go out prowling at night, and she knew he did it, and she allowed it. And he would look to create drama.
Jerzy was a person whose creativity was very much dependent on it being appreciated and supported and admired. And I think in that respect, Kiki played a very important role in his life. But his life, of course, had many compartments.
When you were here before, we just began to touch on part of your behavior that encompasses going out at night. Where do you go? When you go out at night? And you led me to believe that it was more than just going out to get a beer or two.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you do that every night?
Right.
What time do you go out?
12.
Midnight.
1.
Midnight
1:30.
or 1.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where do you go?
I had several friends who accompanied him on various adventures in the wee hours in New York, and they were pretty far out.
And did you?
No, I never did.
He used to try to goad sort of stalwart pillars of the community into accompanying him to sex clubs or whatever, because he wanted to see their reaction more than anything else.
And did you ever go?
I never went.
What are sex clubs? Clubs. I would go to clubs, tonight to discotheques, you know, but not the sex club.
No, sex clubs are places where people are having sex.
You mean it's like a Gruppensex, as the Germans put it?
Totally,
No.
and S&M places?
Oh, really? No. No, I'm not. This is not my fantasy at all. You want to talk about my fantasies, or you want to talk about Kosinski's? Because I can tell you what they are if you want, but it's beside the point. It's not sadomasochism.
I just walk around and I look. I keep watching. Remember being there, I like to watch.
Right.
I love to watch. I'm all over the place.
Now, you only go there to watch.
I go there to write.
Where do you keep your pencil?
I would say that it has a certain ambiance because it's probably one of the most humiliating pieces to be to be deprived of motion in.
He had a series of women who went with him, his companions. The one who'd been with him the longest was Cynthia, who was wonderful.
You know, he drove me in this big old blue Buick. Was it a Buick that he had? This whole kind of huge American car, which he loved. And he said, I want to show you some places. And I thought, oh, okay, here it comes.
So have you been a good little girl?
No.
No?
One of the places we went was this weird S&M place. I just loved it because it was right out of one of his books, and I thought, oh my God, I'm living one of his books, because it was down in the meat packing district.
Well, Destiny right now is being shackled to what used to be a meat rack where this is the meat packing district. This building used to be functional, so that adds a little ambiance right there. And then she also has a leg spreader on.
This was an observer. This is a man that brought a mental notepad, if not a physical notepad, everywhere he went.
It's really interesting. He used to come down, he'd have couples, we'd do little scenes and whatnot. It was kind of fun.
He used to do little scenes?
Yeah, but he mostly liked to watch. He was a kind of a voyeur. He'd participate, he would encourage things to happen.
I was prepared for anything because I had read all of his books, and I thought, ooh, this is gonna be weird. And actually, Jerzy was, I think the correct term would be hypersexual. He was incredibly driven sexually, and he was relentless. He could go on and on and on.
How did I feel about it? I didn't feel a thing about it. It didn't have anything to do with my life with Jerzy. Never intruded on us in any way, shape, or form. Perhaps I deliberately didn't think about it, didn't want to have it intrude on me, and turned my face away. Why? Didn't I have enough else? Am I going to be such a spoiled little girl that everything is going to be my way? Didn't he give me enough? Didn't he give me so much more than most any other woman ever had? People used to say to them, oh, why can't I have a Kiki? I'll tell them why they can't have a Kiki, because their Kikis didn't have a Jerzy.
The first time I went to Jerzy and Kiki's apartment, I was very surprised by the fact that it was so small, and that Kiki essentially slept on the couch, on the pull-out couch in the living room.
Talk and so on, but also you would have sex sometimes in that room.
Mm-hmm.
And did it not worry you?
that she was next door, his wife?
No, not at all. And in fact, Kiki and I became very close friends, and we kind of had an understanding. And I would never have wanted to be in Kiki's position because she worked so hard. She was his companion, his cook, his editor, his typist, his business manager. She really worked for him, and in order to really be with this man forever, you would really have to say, I am donating or devoting my life to Jerzy Kosinski, and I was ready to donate a few years, but not my entire life.
I was accused that there's so much sex in my novels, that as a photographer, I take too many pictures of naked women, or naked men, or naked transsexuals. And to this I can say this. I have seen people mutilated, and people beaten, and people arrested, and people persecuted, and people prosecuted, and I can say that the only human instinct that we have is actually the instinct that brings us together, that is responsible for life. For me, sexuality is the instinct to life. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
There wasn't much time for us to see each other. The only time we could meet was actually at night. It looked like out of a Nazi movie. It looked like a Gestapo cellars or something, and with horrible things going on. And Jerzy would just get a kick out of me being totally scared.
He said that he thought that love was something entirely invented, that it really didn't exist for real, that those sentiments and feelings belonged to the poets, and he had the same attitude towards it as I have, for example, towards superstition.
Sometimes he tried to justify the fact that he didn't like very much to touch or to kiss, or he wasn't a very tender person, by saying that the reason I didn't like he didn't like kissing was because of his mother, implying a relationship that he had with his mother, a sexual relationship, or physical relationship with his mother beyond what we know as normal. Because he referred to his mother and kissing on the lips, and that's why he didn't do it with other women. But then I read that in Blind Date, so I wonder whether or not that was part of his, if that was true, or if it was just part of his stories. Rough. He was almost as if to prove something to himself or to the women that he was with. And I don't know exactly what. Sometimes I had the feeling that it was out of a sense of revenge.
Suddenly, stupid Ludmila appeared, leading her huge dog on a rope. Her behavior was odd. She kept asking about Lech. She wriggled herself out of her sack and naked pulled me towards her. She ordered me to lie down between her thighs. I tried to free myself, but she whipped me with a belt. My screams attracted other shepherds. A tall shepherd mounted the woman while she writhed below him, howling at his every move. A man struck open-handed blows at her breasts, leaned over and bit her nipples and kneaded her belly. When he finished and rose, another man took his place. From behind the cemetery appeared a mob of women with rakes and shovels. It was led by several younger women who shouted and waved their hands. The women held stupid Ludmila down flat against the grass. They sat on her hands and legs and began beating her with the rakes, ripping her skin with their fingernails, tearing out the hair, spitting into her face. Lech tried to push through, but they barred his way. Stupid Ludmila lay bleeding. Blue bruises appeared on her tormented body.
He was jealous, and he started beating me. And he became more and more violent, almost like crossing a border, becoming a different person. And I was quite panicked because, first of all, I wasn't as strong, and also because I thought it was just a mental game, and suddenly it was a game that I wasn't capable of playing anymore because he was much deeper into it if it was a game. But for me, it was just the reality of being hurt at the time and not being able to defend myself. And he was asking me to tell him that I loved him, which I didn't want to do, even being, attacked like this. I still didn't want to tell him. And then finally he stopped and started crying and told me that he loved me and all that. For me, that was the peak of our obsessive love affair.
Truth is relative, and we're getting here into some kind of Citizen Kane situation when you talk to people about someone and you're trying to get probably an honest picture of that person. With all your efforts, you cannot be sure you're on the mark, and you will never be, because it's simply impossible.
He's associated with sexuality. He's associated with dungeons of love. And that was why he was hated. Because it's not permitted for a Holocaust survivor to play with the black games of power and dominance. If you are a Holocaust survivor, you must from then on wear a white gown and a little halo. You must be angelized. Now, I think that's ridiculous. That's just Puritanism in another disguise.
In 1982, the Village Voice, a little weekly, left-wing weekly in New York City, ran a big investigative piece, and it alleged that Jerzy used ghostwriters, that he was associated with the CIA, and that he had plagiarized at least one other novel when he wrote his own books. In effect, Jerzy was discredited.
He put on a very brave persona, but it wounded him, because it was the big lie of anything anyone could have said. That was the silliest accusation to make. And as the big lie, sometimes people believe it.
But don't you think that was the game that he was playing, and then he was stricken by the same?
Not at all. I think that.
But the game of lies, and then
no.
By the same
I think it's very different. When Jerzy did it, it was never with malice aforethought. It was always about. He was kind.
I aim at truth, not facts, and I'm old enough to know the difference.
I think there's no doubt about it that he has sort of artificially manufactured some of his work. It was not entirely the product of a single-minded author working in his own mode.
Well, they allege that they were written by the ghosts. I just wonder why the ghosts don't publish their own books under their own names. Why do they have to perform as the ghosts if they have this incredible talent?
What I want to do now is a novel about a writer who, because of his exposure, who because of his politics, who because of his visibility, has been denounced as someone who does not write his own books, who is not responsible for his own achievement. And to find out what happens to such a man if suddenly the only spiritual background that he had is removed from him, removed by collectivity, by people around him. He knows the truth. He knows, of course, he had written what he had written. He knows that everything he had written is entirely his own. But people around him don't know that. They repeat the headlines.
Kosinski spent 4 years writing The Hermit of 69th Street, which he hoped would be his most important work. The book, published in 1988, was received with hostility by the critics, fellow writers, and the public. Kosinski never wrote again.
I myself am not sure how long his work will last. It's just,
And The Hermit of the 69th Street?
I found that incoherent. I couldn't make head nor tail of it.
This time he can't just float. This time his inner buoyancy act just doesn't work, and he is about to go under. to drown in their very words.
This is where Jerzy, I think, started reinventing himself. I think that the awareness of his own Jewishness coincided in time. It would have been triggered perhaps by the fact that his writing as such has ended.
He went out of his way to attack the idea of the Holocaust Museum. He attacked the worship of the Holocaust as a destruction of Jewish traditions. I think he had a good point, but the way he would do it was so intense, and I think almost deliberately designed to provoke that you wonder why he did it. So yes, he came back to his Jewish identity, but he reconstructed it into a challenge to orthodoxy.
Am I going to look at myself again and again and again on American television being killed by people in Nazi uniforms? Is this my history? And so I say, it is tragic the way they died, and it is tragic that their children died as well, and it is profoundly tragic, and there's no name how tragic it is that they have died because they were Jews, but they would have died anyhow. But there's one thing that should not die with them, and that is the way I sit, and the way I write, and the way I think. My tradition should not die with them. The minute I see, and here I speak only for myself, anything to do with what is known as the Holocaust, and what is known to me as 1939 until 1945, I turn this thing off.
In the 60s, and I think in the 70s as well, he was one of the most mistreated emigre writers in Poland. The Attacks on the Painted Bird, when it appeared, I don't think there is a parallel. I don't think that any other book drew that much of fire, that much of venom. And the reason was that Painted Bird was seen as a political statement, as an anti-Polish statement. And then when he returned to Poland in 1988, the reception was beyond belief. I don't think that anybody else was treated with such deference and such enthusiasm. And I think that confused them.
There were 4,000 people who queued from 5 in the morning, unless there were 5,000 who queued from 4. They went around 3 sides of the block, waiting patiently to get a copy of The Painted Bird.
Jeżeli teraz czasami słyszę w Ameryce i ktoś mi to czasami zarzuca, mówią JERZY Kosinski, bo tak wymawiają Jerzego Kosińskiego w Ameryce, jesteś pisarzem zimnym i bardzo detached. You're writing in a very cold fashion. Pan pisze z bardzo zimnym wyrazem. To ja sobie czasami tak patrzę na moich krytyków amerykańskich i mówię, czy ty wiesz, mój drogi, tylko do siebie, co to znaczy być odseparowanym od przyjaciół, od stanu wyrastania, od kochanek, od bardzo dobrych ludzi, których znałem, dzięki którym przeżyłem wojnę, którzy nazywają się po prostu Polacy.
Kosiński zaczął występować w telewizji w Polsce z malowanym ptakiem i ukazała się notatka chyba w Ekspresie Wieczornym, że Kosiński w czytelniku w Warszawie na ulicy Wiejskiej będzie podpisywał książkę Malowany ptak.
Przyjechaliśmy do Warszawy ze szwagrem, do Kosińskiego. Chcieliśmy się zobaczyć z Kosińskim. No i wybraliśmy się z dworca centralnego na pieszkę, na relaks. Chcieliśmy sobie uskutecznić. Przyszliśmy gdzieś przed 9, to się okazało, że byliśmy już, ja byłem 305, a szwagier 304. Czekamy w kolejce. Kolejka się powiększa, ja jeszcze takiej kolejki nie widziałem, nie?
Pisałem taką karteczkę, że ja się nazywam Warchoł Edward, jestem z Dąbrowy Rzeczyckiej, matka Maria, Andrzej ojciec, imiona rodziców.
I think the mystery was self-nurturing in terms of his creativity, in terms of his identity. And unraveling that mystery, which I think was beginning to take place to some extent already then, was in a way contributing to a dissipation of that life-giving energy which the mystery provided for him.
Pyta się szwagra Kosiński: Panie Warchoł, a czy pan napisał adres? Bo będę się chciał skontaktować. W pociągu wyciągnąłem książkę, zacząłem czytać. No i mówię do szwagra, że zresztą on to nie, ani nie napisze, ani nie przyjedzie.
Gdyby on żył i pokazał się, i o te głupoty, co on opisał o tych ludziach, o tych wsiach, co oni go przetrzymywali i wiedzieli, co im grozi za to. I oni go przetrzymali i on potrafił powiedzieć takie głupoty straszne o ludziach, to ja mówiłbym sama go zarżnęła nożem.
I think he ran out of the capacity to hide himself. I think he felt he was being found out finally after all those years, that time had run out on him, and his true self, which was hollow, was going to be discovered.
Te puszki na rakiety tośmy zbierali wzdłuż toru po niemieckich konserwach, jak transport przeszedł, i robiliśmy z tego komety, takie zwane jak teraz tu jest, ten ogień w tych kometach.
People always carried small sacks on their backs or at their belts for collecting fuel for the comets. In the daytime, peasants working in the fields baked vegetables, birds and fish in them. At night, men and boys coming home would swing them with all their strength and let them fly into the sky, burning fiercely like soaring red discs. They really did look like comets in the skies with their flaming tails, whose appearances signified war, plague, death.
In the morning, I got up and I said, oh my God, we've got so much to do, we're going to be leaving. I better get Jerzy up. And I went to his room and I said, that's terrific, the bed is made, he's already up and about. And I could hear music very quietly coming from the bathroom. And I went in there and he was almost submerged in the water, and I said, oh my God, Jerzy! And I leaped to turn off the tap, which was trickling. And I thought that he'd fallen asleep or had a heart attack. I didn't understand what was happening. And then I realized what was happening. And then I went and called the doctor, thinking he'd bring him back to life. He didn't.
Kiki, I believe, called me before anyone else. And she said, he's finally done it. And I knew what she meant. There was no question that Jerzy felt that he had the right to check out whenever he wanted to check out.
I was angry when I heard he had committed suicide. A lot of his friends were angry. And then I cried. Because, God damn it, he should not have killed himself. He was a loss. Great, great loss. And in a way, the villagers had finally caught up to him. They had overtaken him, and he put a bag over his head and killed himself.
On siedzi na samym dnie. Na samym dnie w piekle, tam go nie wypuszczą za nic.
Motionless, our Kos waits for the other birds. Will they only mock him or peck him to death? The fog lifts. Across the river, the lights of Brooklyn flicker now, as they did when Vladimir Mayakovsky and Thomas Wolfe stood there. Then from somewhere, From inside the fog, a single disembodied voice says, "We've got him." Before he can confront its source, someone from behind him hits him on the head with something hard. They drag him all the way to the end of the dockyard, but what for? What does it matter what for? What matters is life. Life is a state of reflection. Now these faceless men pick him up as if he were a dead doll. First they grab him by the arms, legs and torso, then they lift him high off the ground. They stretch him a bit. They swing him back and forth and back, as if he were a hammock suspended between them. And they toss and throw him in the air. Him, Norbert Korsky, the unsinkable lotus man, disguised as the unsinkable Molly Brown. The end came suddenly.
From the minute the world press knew Jersey no longer belonged to me as my Jersey, he became a celebrity. And he belonged to the people who knew him better, the people who claimed to be his friends, the lovers who claimed to be his lovers. He belonged out there to a whole world who reinvented Jerzy Kosinski as if it wasn't big enough already. Didn't need any reinvention. But everyone wanted their piece of him, and they took it. Goodbye, Keeks. I'm about to put myself to sleep for a bit longer than I have done it until now. Call the time eternity. The reason is that given my current physical and mental state, with no repair in sight, deteriorating from day to day, I can no longer give of myself what I claim I be the prime victim of my decrepitude. And you are the very last person I would want to hurt now or ever. The rest is entirely up to you. Embrace our friends and remember that no matter what crossed your mind, at times you and only you mattered to me as much as did my life from day to day. Be well, my love. He said what he knew that I already knew, that only I mattered to him.
Jerzy Kosinski died of an overdose. His post-mortem report states that his physical condition was good for his age, with no signs of decrepitude. He left his estate to a Jewish college in Chicago.